Hello, everyone. Today we have the lovely Tamsen with us. Go ahead and give us your introduction. When did you get diabetes?
I got diabetes January 7th of 2019. So roughly 70 something days ago, I believe I was diagnosed.
70 days ago. Wow,
Mm-hmm.
newbie, huh?
Very new. Very, very new.
Okay.
Yes,
Go on.
I caught the flu from my toddler, which lit the powder keg. I had no symptoms outside of the diagnosis, no symptoms that would have sent me at all to the hospital. But I was admitted with a blood sugar of 1,006 and an A1C of 16.1%.
That'll do it.
Yep, that did it. So it was, I don't remember a lot of it because I was in full-blown DKA, but it was pretty scary to say the least. And the doctor said there's not a lot of medical reasons why I should have been still breathing when I came in. So, but I was, and we're doing great now. So it's been an interesting start to the year, to say the least.
Fantastic. Good to hear. Other than the grim news they told you there, oh, you're lucky to be breathing. Wow, it really makes you feel better. Other than that, what did your doctor tell you when you were diagnosed?
That I had type 1, and they really didn't tell me much of anything. I have a 7 and a 3-year-old. I had gestational diabetes with them, but it always went back to normal levels after that. So my youngest is 3 years old. So I knew how to count carbs, but they really didn't say much of anything, which was very surprising. I was like, okay, didn't I almost die? Like, pretty sure you'd have something for me to go on. And the educator that came into the ICU, I was in the ICU for 2 days and then the hospital for 2 days. And the one that came in, I told my husband after she left, I said, I just don't have a lot of faith in this one. Because she basically said, don't worry, we'll teach you how to mess with your dosing so that you can still eat whatever you want. And I was like, okay, what part of I will follow all the directions did you not understand? And now you're telling me basically how to go like eat pizza in a closet and still pull it off. And yeah, I didn't have a lot of faith in that person, to say the least.
Yeah, it's like, hey, we're going to teach you how to not take good care of yourself and get away with it.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, okay, so I nodded sweetly, and in my head I was like, yeah, we're gonna find a plan B because she's not gonna be I'm not gonna be alive long if I go that route. So I just smiled and nodded and was like, this is just not gonna work. Get out your phone, start Googling.
You're like the least, like the kind of patient doctors hate. Like I'm just going to Google this myself, but it makes sense for us, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Did they give you any advice on what to eat?
Anything I want.
Oh, yeah.
Eat whatever you want, and here's carb ratios, carb to insulin ratios. So eat whatever you want, and they started me on a 1-to-8 ratio. Was what they gave me. And so I was doing that. I didn't have a CGM to begin with. I got that about a month into it. So I was doing that, but in the midst of, doing that, I quickly found that low carb was probably the way that I was going to go. I have a background in biology. And so I was like, okay, this seems counterintuitive if we have a glucose issue and we have 0 beta cells anymore. So why would I keep eating? Like, it just didn't make sense to me. And so the very they gave me the typical, like, they scared me to death that like if I went under 90, I was going to die. Like terrified me. But I was in the midst of moving towards low carb. Obviously the dosing was, I had a couple lows. Like I went so low that like the meter didn't register. I was like, oh, I guess that's low. So it was probably like 30 or something. I don't know how low those meters go. And so my husband and I were like, oh, we freaked out. We like took the 15 grams of carbs, every 15 minutes, like for it to come back up. And again, I didn't really know what was going on at this point. I was only a couple weeks into this whole adventure that we had been thrust into. And then it went like crazy high. Like then it went up to like 200 and something. So then I was like freaking out. So then I took more insulin and, this,
the roller coaster,
which was stressing me out to no end. And I was like, yeah, this is not going to work. No. But it was, I switched educators quickly, because the one that they gave me initially, once I came out of the ICU, was a type 1 themselves, but was very much the eat whatever you want and we'll just dose accordingly. And they weren't the picture of health at all. And I'm like, like, again, it was the common sense factor just was rubbing me, my brain. And so I switched and I found I tried a different one. And she was like, okay, if you're going to do low carb, then we need to adjust these ratios, but still didn't tell me anything about how to dose for protein or that normal blood sugars were totally doable. Again, was kind of, she was freaking out. She's like, wow, you're under 100. And I'm like, yeah, shouldn't I be? Like, isn't that okay? Like, oh, we got to be really careful about that. And I was like, oh, okay. I came home and told my husband, I'm like, I think we're going to have to do this on our own. Like, I think there's nobody out there. And yeah, serendipitously found my way to people that, I think are taking a good proactive approach. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. We're not going to be totally alone, but I don't have a lot of faith in the healthcare system at the moment. So, but I haven't been in it very long. Yeah, I picked up from everybody else that was like my initial conclusions were probably correct. Because the second or the third week, they had me submitting my numbers to the diabetes educator, and they were still, in the 120s and the 130s. They weren't crazy. They weren't going like this, but they definitely weren't where they are now. And I got an email back that said, yeah, we don't need to see you anymore. You're totally great. Keep doing what you're doing. And I'm like, almost died 2.5 weeks ago. And now you're telling me because you saw numbers for like 3 or 4 days. Oh, you're great. We don't need, like, I couldn't get back in for an appointment. I was like, oh, okay. Okay. Is this what happens? Is this normal? A little scary. I was like, oh, alrighty, but I've got the internet. I'm a good researcher. We will figure it out. So that's my very newbie story.
All right. When did you find out about, I assume you found out about type 1 grit through looking at these low carb groups. Like when did you find them? And when did you find Bernstein?
I found Bernstein and type 1 3 weeks in, and someone had suggested a podcast, and for the life of me, I'm going to blank on the podcast, but it was 2 doctors that were talking, and it was pediatric type 1, which I found through a type 1 athletes group. So I had thankfully had a friend who was like, oh, here's this type 1 athletes group. And I was like, okay, good. We're at least headed in the right direction with that. People that are active and are doing things. And they posted a link to this podcast. And so I listened, and they mentioned Bernstein and they mentioned type 1 grit. And I was like, oh, okay, hopped over to Amazon, got the book on Audible, started listening to it right away. And, the heavens opened, the sun came down. I was like, okay, here we go. Science and research and real life, application. And then I knew I found my people. So I was all in right from the get-go. And life really, like, it's stabilized. I'm listening to, friends that, have had it so much longer than I have, 20, 30, 40 years, because they were diagnosed as children, and they're like, oh, it's so awful. And it's so this, and we're so sorry for you. And I told my husband, I said, I have to just say, you know what? It's been really unexpectedly easy. Like, I didn't see this coming. I didn't see my pancreas like picking up and leaving the building. Like, didn't see it coming, but I'm healthier than I've ever been. Like, I'm running. I'm, going to look at getting a road bike. My whole family is eating better. So if mom can't eat it, no one else is eating it. And it really is because of Bernstein's book and the Type 1 Grit group that I was like, oh, these people know what they're doing. Okay, look at all these people that are getting normal blood sugars and are happy and doing things. And I said, the goal is avoiding all the nasty apathies. That's my goal. Avoid all those nasty apathies.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want any of those. So just lost signal on the Dexcom G6. If you hear buzzer, it's deciding to. Oh, we're back on.
So many of you recognize that noise.
Signal loss.
I can imagine the audience cringing like, oh, is my meter going off? You basically have the experience of what diabetics should get, I feel like, because you figured it out real early on. And so you never had to deal with the huge complications and huge struggles that most diabetics face given the normal advice. Like, I think ideally they should just get a packet with all the essentials from Bernstein and all that stuff, and they'd be following your path, but that's not what happens. So for the little bit of time you had before learning about the low-carb approach, where were your blood sugars at?
I was in, you mean before I was diagnosed, or?
Just a few weeks before you were really...
Oh, the few weeks before?
Yeah.
I would be probably from 80 to 160. I had a really hard time with my fasting blood sugar. So that would be 160, 170. And then once I could get to the gym and get a walk-in or go to spin class, it would come back down. And then it would go, I would say probably in the 100 to 120 is probably where it was. Because even if I was still being mindful of the carbs, like I knew, like, okay, pizza, not going to happen. French fries, not going to happen. Like, I knew the basic common sense. Done, we've been on a few eating plans throughout my lifetime. And I was like, okay, go back to the basics, still not as low carb as I am now, but that little bit of a roller coaster for sure with my fastings and trying to get those back down. But then as I was starting to exercise, because I finally had energy now that now that we had some insulin, because I'd been really tired before getting diagnosed. And that was, one of their questions, like, were you tired? I said, I'm the mother of 2 small children and I run my own company. I've been tired for 10 years. Like, that it wasn't anything that I thought was outside of the normal be a mom type of a deal. Now I realize, oh yeah, it's amazing if you get your blood sugar under control. Like, I had all this energy. So I was working out, which the diabetes educators were like, we're going to have to keep you may not want to do that. And I'm like, okay, don't you want me to like exercise and move? Oh, but you could go low. I'm like, okay, but shouldn't we figure out how to fix that low? Because don't you want me to work out? So I had a few like 30, 40 lows after working out because I didn't understand. They didn't show me how insulin worked. So like I would eat lunch and then go to spin class. And of course, aerobic activity for an hour with insulin on board. For me, I would drop very, very quickly. So that's where I would have, I think I had 4 real low, like probably in the 30s or the 40s because it went off the meter. And then probably closer to the 2 high 100s, 200s for my fastings.
That's actually not bad at all. Considering, I mean, on a bad day, you know, you can get like that even on a low carb diet for some people. But anyways, now that you're doing the Bernstein approach, where would you say your numbers are now?
They're 85 with a standard deviation of, according to the app today, 16.
Bravo. Very nice. Very nice.
So they are, very few people say very nice. Everyone's like, you got to be careful. Like, you know, low carb has been proven that you're going to have like insulin resistance. And I'm like, because you read some random article somewhere? Like, oh, okay. That's probably been, you know, it's hard when no one around you says, oh, good job. Way to do like research and, you know, have a nice flat line number. Outside of type 1 gritters. It takes a lot of courage, I have found, watching all of you and being like, okay, very few people are going to say, oh, good job. But yeah, I'm doing 6, 12, 12 for my carbs. So breakfast, lunch, dinner, and watching, you know, to see, okay, green pepper versus red pepper. Yep, they affect my body differently. Okay, that protein powder versus this protein powder, you know, what one works. But I am glad that it really is staying right in the mid 80s and very, very flat. So, to me, that's, people say, oh, I know how much work that is. But it's not stressful. So to me, it's not a lot of work. It's like, I can measure cucumber slices and go, okay, 8 ounces of cucumber is exactly what I should have for lunch. To not have to chase a number all afternoon, to me, feels like less work than eat a slice of pizza and then have to chase this to myself. That is exhausting because it just feels more out of control. So
I agree 100%. I mean, people, it seems so daunting because, you know, you cook more of your own food and this and that, and you actually have to, you know, watch things more carefully, measure things more carefully. But the alternative is a lot worse. And I mean, what I find really interesting is that they don't seem to bag on people following a more plant-based approach where it's a lot of carbs and very little fat, where they're still chasing those highs and lows just like you are any other way. Oh, that's apparently easier? It's not. The easiest one was one you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
So that's good. That's good. What else?
Yeah.
What else? Oh. So now that you're doing that, now that you got your blood sugars under control, what's something you like to tell any diabetics might be watching this right now?
Kip Bernstein's book. Be open to reading it. I'm a huge believer that lifelong learning is where we should all be. Like in everything in the world. Like we should always be learning and be respectful of sources of information. What I tell people is do your research, vet the sources. I'm a lawyer by profession. And so you're always questioning like, well, why? Oh, that person said this. Well, why did they say it? What were their motives? follow the money, which, very quickly you start following the money. And I'm like, you look at who owns what and who does this and where this corporate is and where that is. And you're like, why? Like my meals in the hospital were eat 45 grams of carbs for every meal. And they didn't care what the carb was. It was like, here, you want mac and cheese? Like just eat, here, you can have it. It's 45 grams. You can't have anything else to eat, but you can have this. And I'm like, that just doesn't seem, shouldn't you give me like a grilled chicken breast and, maybe some fibrous vegetables? Like, shouldn't that be a good thing? So that's what I've been telling friends, because it's people that I had in my world that I had no idea were type 1 diabetics have come out of the woodwork, which has been really great, because it's like you have that instant camaraderie, like, oh, you get it. Oh, that's your meter. Yep. Okay. It's a cool part. I like that part of it. But it's still surprising how some of them aren't open to just hearing. And like, you've been chasing a roller coaster for 20 years and you're exhausted. Listen to a book, like watch some videos on YouTube, like be open to learning, and then, vet the source. Look at, for me, I loved listening to Bernstein's book. I'd listened to it on Audible first, and I did not set out to be a lawyer. So that the point in his book, when he's talking about no one would publish his paper because he wasn't a doctor. So he's like, fine, screw it. I'll go to medical school because then I'll have the initials and people will listen to me. That's exactly how I went to law school. I was in corporate business America working in trademark licensing and getting really frustrated working with attorneys. And finally, one time I was like, okay, what do I have to do? They're like, well, you have to have a law degree. I was like, fine, I'll just go get one of those. Like, if that will change the game over here and people will take me seriously. So I just laughed out loud, because I'm like, it's ridiculous to me that we still, like, we won't listen to people unless they have like the traditional stuff behind their name. But I loved that when I was vetting him as a source, I'm like, he had nothing to gain. Like, you have nothing to gain by going to take on a professional degree at the midpoint in your life. He's reversed all of these horrific, conditions and stuff that he had. And he's helping people have really like normal blood sugars, which means normal lives, which means a quality of life that the doctors in the healthcare mainstream is not presenting as an option. And so that's what sorry, it's becoming a very long-winded answer.
No, that's the whole point of these. That's the whole point.
That's what I would tell people, is just be open to it. If you're not enjoying life, and I will say, I am so happy. I feel incredible. I'm training for a 5K. I'm getting ready to bike 150 miles across Michigan. We live in Michigan. I can go to an aerobics class at 7:00 at night. Like, my brain isn't foggy anymore. My vision isn't goofed up anymore. I just thought it was because I was getting old. And I feel so good compared to out of control blood sugars, which is what I had before I was diagnosed. I mean, at some point in the last year, because they always test my A1C, because I had gestational with the boys, at some point in the last year, my pancreas decided to kick the can. So I lived with out of control blood sugars. I didn't know it. And I felt horrible. Like, I was cranky and crabby, and I didn't really want to get off the couch, and my kids were exhausting me, and it's a night and day difference. And I'm like, if all I need to do is eat stuff that's good for my body and be mindful about how this stuff affects it, and I don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like, RD, is it Dykman?
Mm-hmm.
RD, and Bernstein and the Jason Attar. Like I'm like, I don't have to reinvent these wheels. Like these people have figured this stuff out. All I have to do is be willing to learn from them. And my husband's not stressed out because he's watching my numbers all the time. You know, if we go up to like a 90, he's like, oh, you're going high. Are you okay? I'm like, funny, honey. Like you're hilarious. Like that's how I want my family to be. It's a family disease now, because if it affects one of us, it's going to affect everybody. And just be open to listening to these stories, to seeing people that are doing so remarkably well when the rest of the world tells us, you know, get ready for like the worst ride of your life and figure out how to pay for all these things and you're just doomed, which I just don't believe it. I think we can have amazing, incredible lives, and it's not rocket science. Like it really is, to me, pretty basic when you boil it down. So.
Yeah. And I've noticed this sort of a doom and gloom kind of vibe coming a lot of diabetics who just don't see a way out. And I mean, you try to talk to them, but I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's the whole point of this series, really, is because, you know, you can give them all the facts you want, but in the end, sometimes it takes actual real life stories to get the message across. It's like, hey, this works, guys. Give it a go. And yours is a good one. I really think it'll help people. But speaking of helping people, someone in the comments on one of the videos wanted me to start asking this. What do you eat in a typical week?
Typical week, I eat for breakfast. I have 8 ounces. See, I know these things now. I have 8 ounces. I have tracked everything. I have 8 ounces of egg whites, and I found this great guacamole salsa that is 2 grams of carbs for, I think, 32 grams of it. And I like it. So I eat that for breakfast 5 days out of 7. I have a protein shake if I get sick of the eggs, which again, most days I like it. For lunch, I will have chicken, and then I'll mix it in with either cucumbers or celery or sometimes broccoli, but I usually stick with chicken and then the veggies, and then I'll have the Boursin cheese. I don't know, you can get it at Costco. It's like, I've never had it before, but I love it now. About 2 ounces of that. And dinner tonight, I had cucumbers. So I'll have a veggie, and then we either, like, my husband will grill steak or salmon or hamburgers. I've discovered I really like green olives. We found these amazing, like, stuff I never would have shopped for before, that to me has opened up this whole new world of flavor that is not coated in sugar. We just did the like final pantry purge because I have 2 kids. They're 7 and 3, and I'm doing the trial net testing on them. But it was like, you know what? Ketchup is not good for anybody. This Heinz 57 is not good for anybody. It's going. Like, I don't care how much is in that bottle. I don't care how much we bought. We're tossing that. So that's that's pretty much my staple, is a protein that I enjoy. Like, I love salmon, I love tilapia, I love chicken, steak. I don't know how I would do this as a vegan. That I have no idea. I was like, I was a vegan in college. I told my husband, I said, I don't know that I could pull off. I said, I'm sure there's people that do it and they can do it well. I said, but I'm glad that we're at least keeping the protein food group. Like, we're good on that part. But it's been fun because I know my kids are healthier. You know, I'm not feeding them disastrous chicken nuggets anymore. I'm not pulling out the Velveeta shells and cheese, which you know these things are not great for you, but you're like, we're in a hurry. You know, we'll think about that later. And the way that for as dramatic as my diagnosis was, and it was like, I started throwing up about 3:00 in the morning. By 4:00 in the afternoon, I don't remember much of anything. Like the next 8 hours, I remember about 5 minutes, because I was completely delirious at that point. But is when I woke up the next morning, which happened to be my 44th birthday, it was very calm. And I told my husband, I said, it just feels like I moved out of a house. So like, if you move, like here was my old house, but we sold it and we're now in a new house, and the new house has new furniture and new carpet and new paint. And I know the old house, like I know what I used to eat. I know what I used to do, but just like, I wouldn't go back and visit my old house typically. You know, some people might, you know, if you lived, I guess, close by or go back to your childhood home, but let's assume that most of us, we don't move back into the old house. Like, somebody else is there. It's not your house anymore. That's really what this feels like. And I'm very thankful because I know it's a very emotional disease, and it is. I tend to cry while I'm running, but it's out of sheer joy. Like, I'm alive. I can actually run. I said, you know, people at the Y I try not to like, sometimes it's just like little tears. So I get that it's an emotional disease, or any disease would be. But that mentality for me is like, I like the new food. I like I have my first appointment in just a couple of weeks. So we'll find out what the new like official A1C is. Looks really good on my app at the moment. But you know, I hope that my endocrinologist is supportive of this. I have no clue because I've only met the guy 3 days after I almost died. But it's like going to be like, okay, could I get that prescription for our insulin? And are you okay with this stuff? I have no idea. Hopefully he's going to be okay. But if not, I've gotten enough encouragement from you guys that it's like, smile sweetly and keep doing what you're doing. So that's kind of what it feels like to me, is there was an old house and now there's a new house, and I'd like to just keep living in the new house.
It's like a new beginning. And with the food, one thing I like to point out, like as you were saying, you're eating a lot more stuff now. People always say that you're limiting yourself a lot by cutting out all these processed foods, but really, I mean, I've eaten a more various diet going low carb than I ever had before. You know?
I completely agree. Like I bought, I don't know, like pickled cauliflower and like these jalapeno garlic stuffed olives and artichoke heart something or other. And even my husband tonight at dinner, he's like, this stuff is delicious. I said, I know. I said, the flavors are clear. They're crisp, which is what I definitely noticed very quickly. That, you know, I'd always laughed when like my fitness friends were like, oh my gosh, cucumbers taste like sugar. And I'm like, you're crazy. Like Hershey's tastes like sugar. Cucumbers, it's a cucumber, sweetheart. And now I'm like, no, they actually are very sweet and they taste really, really good. And I'm eating a way larger variety in terms of flavors than I was before. I'm like, you know, pizza kind of all mushes together now. Before, we would have had that like 3 times a week for dinner. And I'm like, yeah, it's really, I wouldn't say it tastes like, salmon and the grilled asparagus does now. Like those have a very, to me, we were talking to the boys one night at dinner, and Kip was like, well, this is like the fancy food. And I was like, okay, honey. All righty. We're going with fancy food. Sure, sweetheart. Are we having the fancy food again tonight? Yep. Yep. Mom has to eat the fancy. But I told her, like, it's all the basics. Like it's the basic food. And I've noticed even with my kids, who at the moment we don't know that they're they're definitely not type 1 that we know of. And we don't know if they're even predisposed to it other than being my kids. But we trying to find ways to talk about it with them. They're 7 and 3. And I'm not a fan of the words like people say, oh, it's a bad this or good this. No, it's all choices. Like, let's not, because then people take it on like, oh, it's a bad carb, or it affects your system this way. And so we just call everything like, it's pancreas preserving. Like, these are the pancreas preserving pancakes. So these are the power, we were coming up with P3. And Kip will now, he's my oldest, and he'll say, so this is good for the pancreas, right? Yes. And then he'll look at something else. This is going to tire out our pancreas, right? Yep. Sure is. He's like, okay. But I'm with you. We're eating so much better. It's, and that's where it's been, I don't know, hard is not the right word, but when people that are type 1 will say, oh my gosh, isn't it so hard? I can't say, oh, you're right. Yeah, it is. It's so hard. So it's finding that way to say, you know what, unexpectedly, this has really been completely doable for getting dumped into the deep end of the pool and not getting a lot of support other than eat whatever you want. And we'll teach you how to mess with your insulin so that you can keep eating what you want. And I even remember asking the person who came in the ICU, and I was like, okay, so you're saying we'll change the dose, like the number ratio, so that I can eat the pizza. She's like, exactly. You'll have a lot more flexibility. And I'm just like, huh? I'm still hooked up to like IVs everywhere. Like, I'm thinking this isn't like a good thing. And it isn't. Now I know. But yeah, I'm like, it doesn't have to be hard. Like I had to unfollow the Dexcom group of people on Facebook. Like I joined thinking, oh, I'll get information. I had to unfollow because I'm like, I'm biting my tongue over here. Like it's going to be bloody because these people are like, oh, I went to Olive Garden and I had like the worst high I've ever had. And I don't understand what was going wrong. And I'm reading these to my husband. I'm like, I said, I'm pretty sure if I just walked into Olive Garden, the air would spike me. Like, I think just breathing would spike the blood sugar. I said, but I think people genuinely don't know. I think there's some people that choose to ignore it, but I think there's a huge amount of people that are like, I have no idea why this went ballistic today. And you're like, you went to Olive Garden. I think we could explain why this went to 400 very like, and higher. Like, I don't remember what the person said, but it was like, they take a picture of their Dexcom printout and it's like this. And I'm like, oh no, that's exhausting to me. And it doesn't have to be that way. So thankfully, all of you that came before I did, I was like, oh, I can just buy a book and join a group and pay attention to what other people are doing and mimic it and adapt it for myself. Cool. This will work. I can live what I refuse to let happen is for my kids, and I will tear up. Their story doesn't get to be my mom died when I was 3. Their story can be my mom died when I was 67. That's fine. their story is not going to be, oh, my mom had her legs amputated when I was a teenager. I had to push my mom, I got to go push my mom's wheelchair. I got to go take care of my mom because somebody told me to eat breadsticks. Like, it's not. I'm not doing it to myself. And their story just will not be, Mom died when I was 3. It almost was. It really almost was. And I didn't have a clue. So to me, I don't see how you can do it any other way.
Yeah, it's definitely much more doable when you're actually knowing what to do rather than sort of being told a lie. And as a side note, you can eat low-carb Olive Garden. It's just not easy. Just not easy at all. Not easy at all. You replace the pasta with vegetables, you can maybe get away with it. But anyways, speaking of your kids, I bet everyone is wondering, now that you've said that, you eat low carb, everyone eats low carb, how would you get your kids to adopt this approach, considering they're not diabetics?
We've got a really good family. I am proud to say we've got a really good family, and it's a team. I think we've just always had this. If one person, needs something, we're gonna we do it together. And I'm the mom, and my husband is completely on board. He's a fitness person anyhow. So he is the crazy person that for years, will eat a bag of spinach and chicken breasts and doesn't care what things taste like. He does, that part of it. So he's been so supportive and so yeah, this is what we're doing. And you are doing the research. And the boys, I said, we've taken the angle of, I don't want you to have an owie like mommy has. So that's how we explain it, especially to Tad, who's 3, because he doesn't like to go to the YMCA. And I need to go so we live in Michigan. So especially in the winter, the last few months, I need to go to spin class. I need to go for a walk. I need to go lift some weights. And how we explained it to him is that's how he helps mommy. He goes to Kids Zone, which is the daycare area, for a couple hours. And that's how he helps mommy with the owie. So I involve them in the food stuff. So they like to cut the vegetables. And when you're eating a lot of vegetables, there's a lot of things for them to do. So they'll cut cucumbers and they'll cut the celery, and involving them and letting them know why why I'm not ordering pizza anymore for dinner, and why I'm not buying Velveeta shells and cheese anymore, and why there isn't, bags of Oreos anymore. And Chris and I both told, it's my husband, we told them, parents screw things up sometimes. And I've told Kip, he's like, Mom, could we get this? And I said, you know what, honey, we'll find a way to make it where it's good for mommy. It's good for our blood sugar. It'll preserve our pancreas. I said, and I've said, I'm sorry so many times in the last 2 months. When you know better, you can make better choices. And so I think it's all of those pieces together of saying, you know what, Mom and Dad did screw up. I used to reward Tad if he went to Kids Zone. I'd give him a bag full of M&Ms. Talk about mom guilt. I mean, it kills me. But now it's we'll find alternatives. You can have 50 cents and we'll go buy a new truck, when you get, you add up your money. So instead of giving you M&Ms, I will pay you, you're helping mommy. It's kind of like a chore, I guess you could say. We're still figuring it out, I'm sure someone's gonna be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're paying your children. Well, I'm not giving them M&Ms, so that's a good thing, at least in my book. But yeah, we've involved them. I ask their opinion, like, oh, do you like this? Do you not like that? If they don't like something, I don't force them to eat it. They're grazing kids anyhow at the moment, where they just kind of nibble here and there. But if our family philosophy is, if mom can't eat it, which people listening to this will probably totally understand. It's like, well, you can eat whatever you want, just dose. I'm like, so it's still learning how to talk to other people, because I don't want them to. No, we're making choices so that we stay flat and in the mid 80s. So I'm trying to take that approach with the boys in how we talk about it, of where it's all about choices. They're going to be teenagers, they're going to be young adults, they're going to be adults, and I want them to learn why we made those choices, the same way that we make choices on respecting how other people choose to live, or choose, whatever they choose to do, or their belief systems. Like, we respect other people's choices, but we make the best choices that we can make based on the resources available to us. They've been great. They have been, which is also really interesting, because a couple of the mom groups for parents of type 1s, kids that I've noticed, especially with Easter coming up and with Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day, I was barely a month into this whole thing, so I really wasn't in groups quite yet. But Easter, there's been a few posts that are, well, I'm going to let my kid have whatever they want, and I'll dose because I don't want them to not feel normal. Now, as a type 1 mother whose children I know are genetically, they don't have the deck stacked in their favor, to say the least, I'm concerned about preserving their health. And then I look at other moms, and I just have a hard time understanding it, when it's like, where did we go so wrong in saying that the Russell Stover's Easter Bunny is what should be normal? This is hurting everybody's kids. Like, because of marketing, this is normal. Because Hallmark says, buy all this candy at Christmas and Valentine's Day and St. Patrick's Day and Easter, and like, let's just stack up every holiday, and it's got to be candy and cupcakes and cookies. They're not gonna, I hope they grasp that is not and should not be normal for anybody. Which is hard, because there's a lot of money in marketing, for sure. But yeah,
It's very concerning, right? But the thing is, and this is why I tell people, oh, well, they gotta feel normal. Well, for one, if you give a diabetic kid a candy bar and give a bunch of insulin, he's not going to feel normal. He's going to spike like crazy. Blood sugar is going to go super low. It's going to go super high. He's not going to feel normal that whole day. He's not going to feel good about it. And the thing is, the parents don't know this, because they don't know what it's like. They just see the kid trying to have a good time and think, oh, well, he's trucking along. Okay. They don't get it. And so you can't really blame him for that. Yeah. But what we can do is, in the end, norms are very fungible, a lot more fungible than we think. If a marketing agency can change the norm, then so can we. So it really just takes brave parents like you actually making the difference and making the new norm what it should be. And I hope a lot of parents watching this are brave enough to do the same. So yeah, really cool that you got your kids on it. I'd say, to summarize, some of the main things that really help is having a strong bond between your kids, so they follow your lead, getting them to an understanding so they know exactly why they're doing it, and being willing to provide alternatives so they can still get what they want with the various recipes and getting them a
Mhm.
truck instead of candy and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Doing that kind of thing and working with them, not just
Yeah.
demanding they
Yeah.
change,
Yep.
that makes a big difference.
Huge. And I said, this is how we help mommy's owie. And it's, in fact, if you ask Kip, my oldest, he said, like, right after I was coming out of the hospital, and people would, because we didn't tell him initially how serious it was. So it was probably about a week and a half after I got out of the ICU. And I told my husband, I said, because we've been very open about the whole experience and what I have. And like, I'm an open book. Anybody want to know anything? I'll gladly tell you whatever you want to know. And I said, people are going to talk about me almost dying. Our friends are, like, they're going to overhear these things. So we have to tell Kip how serious it was. Because he just thought it was mommy has the flu, but it was worse than his brothers because I was still in the hospital. And he was funny because he would say to people, they would say, are you okay? He's like, well, can I tell you? And they'd be like, yeah, you can tell us. He's like, I'm kind of happy and kind of sad my mom almost died. And they would say, okay. He said, well, I'm sad because I don't want my mom to die. He said, but I'm happy because now she's going to be able to run and be on the trampoline. So he understood how different I was behaving just within a very few days coming out of the hospital. And now he will tell people that he's glad that I'm you can't quite say diabetic yet. It almost sounds like almost taekwondo, like the way he says the word, it's not coming out diabetic. But he's like, Mom, I'm glad you have that type 1. And I'll say, I am too, buddy. He's like, cause you're way more fun now. And to him, cause I'm playing, like we're playing together and we're doing things together. And I think that's how they've bought in, is like you said, it's the bond. It's the, let's figure this out. Like, let's figure out how to eat and exercise and do what we need to do. And it's decreased the friction for sure.
Kids are, honestly, the way I see it, they're a lot smarter and more aware than people give them credit for. You can't really lie to them. They know when you're lying, and they can always tell a difference if you're feeling better or worse.
Mm-hmm.
They sort of have a sense for it, especially from their own parents who they know the best.
Yep.
And I wanted to actually go back and recap, because I didn't really ask this earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So try to compare and contrast. How are you feeling before you got diagnosed, before you went low carb, to how you are now? Like, what were some of the sort of complications you were facing back then versus how you are now?
I was incredibly tired. I was incredibly grouchy. It was taking all of my energy to deal with being a mom. I felt like I was always on pins and needles, and I was keeping it all inside. So I'm not a yeller. I'm not a screamer. But I was short. Like, I was very short with them, because now I know I was probably operating at a 400 to 500 plus blood sugar for a very long time to be able to achieve that great old A1C of 16.1. The sugars were high. They were for sure high. I had no energy at night. My vision was goofy. Like, I couldn't read a magazine anymore. And I thought it was because I was 44. Now I realize so I loved reading, and I couldn't read. And I ran my own company, and my brain was just always foggy, which I was still on top of everything. I was still doing everything, but it was just probably the equivalent of like trying to walk and not knowing you were dragging like 500 pounds of dead weight behind you. It was like invisible, but you're putting in so much effort and it was so hard. Now, oh my gosh, I feel amazing. Like I feel incredible. Like on Saturday, I did spin class for an hour and I ran a 5K. Like to be able to say I'm a runner, which I've been saying for about 2 weeks now. Yeah, no, like I wasn't. And I feel good. My brain is like a whole new, like all the cobwebs are gone. I can have like a coherent thought much easier. So it's night and day difference. Like I'm so thankful that I know what it is. Like I just thought I was this really tired, worn down mother who was doing a crappy job. It wasn't. My pancreas has left the building. I need insulin. That's okay. That doesn't mean I didn't screw anything up. That's just for whatever reason. I have my own theories on, chemicals and toxins in our food sources and our environments as to why all this stuff is skyrocketing these days. We won't go down that whole train, but I feel incredible. So I'm so thankful I didn't die. I'm so thankful that it's type 1. I'm thankful for Dr. Bernstein. I'm thankful for the type 1 gritters. I'm thrilled for the geniuses that invented the continual glucose monitor. Like, I don't know how anyone does this without those tools, because I'm doing more in the last 2 months than I've done in years. And I took 3 7-year-olds to the park today by myself. And we played, speaking of alarms, time to take your evening long acting insulin. Yeah, I feel so good. It really is a new beginning, like you've said. It's had way more blessings than what I left the hospital feeling, which was there's not a lot of hope. This is going to be really hard. And this is, and I kind of had the mentality that when people say you can't do this, okay, please move aside, watch out. I'm going to figure this out. Like if you tell me I can't do something, watch me. And so when people say, oh, you can't do this. Like, really? Okay, we're going to figure that out because we can all do these things that we want to do. So yeah,
Fantastic. And I believe that about wraps it up. You have to take your insulin. We'll leave it with a final thought. Can you give us a final thought?
Type 1 is way more of a blessing, can be, because one, we know our numbers better than anybody. And we can have amazing lives and we can feel so good and we can tell our stories and our story can help somebody else, which can help somebody else. And just like you said earlier, if marketing and companies could get us to where we are now, all of us that are experiencing something very differently, we can change it. Like we can change the dialogue. We can change the behaviors. Moms and parents, we vote with our wallets. We vote with our decisions. And there's no faster way to shift everything than moms get on board and they change what they buy at Target. Oh, the world changes overnight. Real quick. Like so fast. So I'm so hopeful now, whether you find a cure or not, I know that you can make the choices that will make everybody's experience with type 1 very very different and good and bright and cheery versus the way that the traditional experience has been. So that to me is inspiring and encouraging, and I'm glad I get to be a part of the story. Didn't see it coming, but I'm glad I get to be a part of it.
Well, here we are, and I find your story particularly inspiring. We'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for telling us your story. I hope it's going to inspire a lot of people. And until next time, keep it easy. This is how Tamsen tamed her type 1.